They said it was just another emergency, another broken body rushed through sliding doors under fluorescent lights. But the hallway went silent when the dog refused to move. The K9 planted its paws against the polished floor muscles, locked teeth bared not at strangers but at the surgeons themselves. Monitors beeped faster. A gurney trembled. Somewhere above a helicopter thundered low enough to rattle the glass. Authority clashed with instinct in that narrow corridor, and no one knew which would break first. Security raised their weapons. A surgeon shouted orders. The dog didn't flinch. Then a rookie nurse stepped forward. No rank, no reputation, just a quiet voice that carried one word barely louder than a breath. Everything changed. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're drawn to powerful emotional stories where truth is buried beneath silence, make sure you subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. The storm had rolled in from the west without warning, swallowing the city in sheets of rain and wind that bent the trees along Harbor Avenue. At Street, Catherine's medical center, the glass facade shuddered under each gust, and the emergency department felt like the eye of a hurricane, bright, frantic, and barely contained. Inside the ER, Nurse Emma Caldwell tightened the strap of her badge as she pushed through the automatic doors. It was her 4th night shift in a row. She still hadn't learned the shortcuts through the trauma wing, still flinched when alarms layered over each other, still felt the faint, persistent pressure of being watched, judged, by people who had been doing this job longer than she'd been alive. "Caldwell, you're on intake 3, charge," Nurse Dana Ruiz called out without looking up from the board. Her voice cut clean through the chaos, calm and authoritative in a way Emma admired. "Yes, ma'am," Emma answered automatically. Dana was the kind of nurse everyone trusted. 20 years in trauma had carved lines into her face and certainty into her posture. If Dana Ruiz said a patient would make it, people believed her. If she said move, people moved. Emma grabbed gloves and stepped into Trauma Bay 3 just as the radio crackled overhead. Code inbound. Military trauma. ETA. 3 minutes. The room shifted instantly. Military trauma meant severity. It meant speed. It meant people higher up the food chain would be watching every decision. Emma felt her shoulders tense as Dana looked up sharply. "All right, listen up," Dana said, clapping once. "This is not a drill. I want blood ready, or prepped, and security in the corridor." "Caldwell, yes, you're with me." Emma swallowed her surprise and nodded. Being pulled closer to the center wasn't always a compliment. Sometimes it meant you were about to be tested in ways no textbook could prepare you for. The ambulance doors slammed open moments later, rain blowing in with them. Paramedics rushed the gurney inside, boots squeaking against the tile. Male, mid-30s, penetrating trauma, possible internal bleeding, one of them rattled off. Vitals unstable. Injuries sustained overseas. Emma's eyes flicked to the patient. His face was smeared with dried blood, jaw clenched even in semi-consciousness. His body was lean, dense, built but not bulky. The kind of strength that came from repetition, not vanity. Dog tags had been taped flat against his chest instead of hanging loose. And then she saw the dog. The K9 moved with the gurney like a shadow tan and black fur, slicked with rain, eyes sharp and unblinking. He wasn't pulling against the leash. He wasn't panicking. He was guarding. "Whoa, hey," a security guard barked, stepping forward. "We can't have an animal in here." The dog's head snapped up. A low growl vibrated through the room so deep Emma felt it in her ribs. Dana lifted a hand. "Easy. Everyone slow down." A Navy medic in soaked fatigue stepped into view, gripping the leash. His face was drawn tight with exhaustion and something darker, fear sharpened by responsibility. "His name is Ranger," the medic said, "and he stays." "Behind him, Doctor." Miles Kettering strode in, already pulling on gloves. He was tall, confident, the kind of surgeon whose reputation walked into the room before he did. "This is a hospital, not a kennel," Kettering said coolly. "Get the dog out of my OR." The growl deepened. Emma noticed it wasn't random. Ranger wasn't reacting to raised voices or sudden movement. His eyes were locked on Kettering. Not aggressive, assessing. The patient stirred, fingers twitching weakly. Ranger leaned closer to the gurney, positioning his body between the man and the people around him with deliberate precision. "Vitals are dropping," Dana said sharply. "We need to move." "We are moving," Kettering snapped, gesturing toward the trauma corridor. "Now." As the gurney rolled forward, Ranger moved with it until they reached the hallway leading to the operating rooms. Then he stopped. Just stopped. He planted himself sideways in the corridor, blocking it completely. Muscles rigid, teeth bared, a silent, immovable wall of fur and intent. "Hey," Security Chief Ron Pike stepped forward. "Control your animal." The medic tightened his grip on the leash, panic flashing across his eyes. "Ranger, stand down." The dog didn't move. The patient's heart rate spiked on the monitor. The beeping grew faster, sharper. "Sedate the dog," Kettering ordered. "We don't have time for this." Emma felt something twist in her chest. She'd been trained to read vitals, charts, lab values. But this was something else. Ranger's posture wasn't chaotic. It was disciplined, purposeful. The dog wasn't blocking the hallway. He was blocking access. "Wait," Emma said before she could stop herself. Every head turned. Kettering's eyes flicked to her badge, then dismissed her just as quickly. "Who are you, Nurse Caldwell?" Dana answered for her, though her brow furrowed. "What is it?" Emma stepped closer, hands open, palms visible. "He's not attacking. He's guarding." "There's a difference," Pike scoffed. "It's an animal." "No," the medic said quietly. "He's trained." Emma's gaze dropped to the patient's wrist as his arm shifted slightly. Just for a second, a faded marking peeked out from beneath the tape, a partial tattoo edges worn by time and friction. Ranger's ears flicked at the movement. He leaned closer, nose brushing the man's knuckles. The patient's breathing steadied, just a fraction. Enough for Emma to notice. "He responds to the dog," Emma said softly. "When the dog feels threatened, his vitals spike." Kettering exhaled sharply. "You're telling me a soldier's life depends on a dog's mood." "I'm saying the dog is trained to detect danger to him," Emma replied. Her voice didn't shake. She surprised herself with that. "And right now, Ranger thinks someone here is a threat." The corridor fell quiet. Rain hammered against the windows. Somewhere above, rotors thundered closer. Pike's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous." Ranger's head turned slowly toward Pike. The growl came back lower, colder. Emma's pulse kicked hard. This wasn't chaos. This was selection. And standing in that narrow hallway with alarms screaming and authority colliding with instinct, Emma realized something terrifying and clear. Ranger wasn't refusing surgery. He was refusing trust. The silence in the corridor didn't last long. It fractured under the weight of authority and fear. "Step away from the animal," Security Chief Ron Pike ordered, his hand drifting toward the taser on his belt. His voice was controlled, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. This is no longer a discussion. Ranger didn't bare his teeth further. He didn't need to. His stance lowered slightly, paws braced, chest squared, trained restraint, not wild aggression. Emma recognized it now with absolute clarity. This dog had been taught not to strike first. He had been taught to hold the line. Dr. Miles Kettering snapped his fingers impatiently. "Dana, move your people. We're burning time." Dana Ruiz didn't move. She stood at the edge of the corridor, arms crossed, eyes flicking between the dog, the patient, and the staff who were slowly gathering despite themselves. Nurses paused mid-task. A respiratory therapist hovered uncertainly with a ventilator cart. Even a couple of surgeons had slowed their stride, curiosity and unease pulling them closer. "Vitals?" Dana asked. Emma glanced at the monitor. Heart rate 140 and climbing, BP unstable. And when the dog moved closer, Emma swallowed. It dropped, slightly. That was enough to make Dana hesitate. "Correlation doesn't mean causation," Kettering shot back. "You're letting superstition interfere with medicine." Emma met his gaze. For the first time since she'd arrived at Street, Catherine's, she didn't look away. "With respect, sir, this patient came in with military escort classified status and a K-9 trained to protect him. That's not superstition. That's protocol, just not ours." Kettering's jaw tightened. "I don't answer to military theatrics. I answer to outcomes. And if forcing this gets him killed," Dana asked quietly, "that stopped him. Only for a second, but it was enough." The Navy medic HM1 Luke Barrett finally spoke again. His voice was hoarse, as if he'd been holding it back for miles. Ranger's not blocking surgery. He's blocking access from people he hasn't cleared. Pike let out a short, humorless laugh. You're saying a dog is deciding who's allowed in my hospital? Barrett's eyes flicked to him, sharp as broken glass. I'm saying the dog has better threat recognition than most people I've met. Ranger's ears twitched again. He shifted his weight, subtly angling his body more squarely toward Pike. Emma felt the hairs on her arms rise. Okay, Dana said, raising her voice just enough to reclaim the room. Nobody moves. Nobody draws anything. Let's slow this down. Slow is not an option, Kettering said. Internal bleeding doesn't wait for feelings. Emma took a step closer to Ranger. She didn't crouch. She didn't reach out. She kept her hands visible and her posture neutral, just as she'd been taught years ago, long before nursing school, back when calm could mean survival. Ranger Barrett warned softly. Easy. The dog's head turned just enough to acknowledge the sound of his handler's voice, but his body didn't shift. Emma glanced at Barrett. What happens if you force him? Barrett's throat bobbed. He won't bite unless there's a direct threat, but he won't move either. And if you sedate him without protocol, he shook his head, you'll lose him, and possibly the patient. Kettering scoffed. That's absurd. No, Barrett said. That's training. Emma's mind raced. She replayed everything she'd seen since the gurney arrived. Ranger's precision, his selective reactions, the way the patient's breathing steadied only when the dog was close, the way his body reacted to certain voices, certain movements. This wasn't emotion. This was a system. Is there a verbal protocol? Emma asked carefully. Something that signals clearance. Barrett hesitated. That hesitation spoke louder than words. Dana noticed it too. Luke, she said, using his first name deliberately. This man's life is on the line. Help us help him. Barrett dragged a hand down his face. There is, he admitted, but it's not. It's not for civilians. Kettering stepped forward, frustration boiling over. Enough. Pike, clear the hallway. If the dog charges, Ranger's growl cut him off. Louder now. A warning. And then the patient gasped. It was a sharp, ragged sound that tore through the tension like a blade. His back arched slightly, fingers clawing weakly at the sheet. The monitor shrieked as his oxygen saturation dipped. Damn it, Dana muttered. We're losing him. Emma moved on instinct. She slipped past Ranger's shoulder slowly, deliberately, and reached the gurney. Ranger didn't stop her. He didn't even look at her. That alone made Emma's breath hitch. She adjusted the oxygen mask, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. Easy, she murmured, though she didn't know if she was talking to the man or the dog or herself. The patient's eyes fluttered open. Just a sliver. For half a second, his gaze locked onto Emma's face. Something flickered there. Recognition or desperation. Then his eyes rolled back, and the alarms spiked again. We need that, or Kettering said, his voice tight now, urgency finally breaking through his arrogance. Emma straightened slowly. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her thoughts were sharp, aligned in a way they hadn't been in years. This dog is the key, she said, not the problem. Pike shook his head. I'm not letting a nurse with 4 weeks on the job override security. Ranger shifted again, paws scraping softly against the floor. The helicopter roared overhead close enough now that the lights flickered. The sound pressed down on the corridor, a reminder that forces far beyond this hospital were already in motion. Emma took a breath. She knew this feeling. The moment before a line was crossed. The moment where staying silent was easier, but wrong. If you sedate him, she said, her voice low but unyielding, you might get your hallway back. But you'll lose the only thing keeping that man alive right now. Kettering stared at her, really stared this time. And how would you know that, he asked. Emma didn't answer immediately, because the truth hovered on the edge of her tongue, dangerous, heavy, and unfinished. Before she could speak, Pike's radio crackled. Chief, a voice said, We've got a situation. Unmarked federal vehicle just pulled up. Agent requesting immediate access. Asked specifically for the K9. Every head turned. Dana exhaled slowly. Kettering swore under his breath. Emma felt her pulse jump, not with fear but with certainty. Whatever was happening here was bigger than hospital policy, and whatever Ranger was protecting it was worth defying authority for. The automatic doors at the end of the corridor slid open with a soft hiss that somehow cut sharper than any shout. She didn't rush in. She didn't need to. The woman wore a dark raincoat over a plain suit, her badge clipped at her waist rather than held up like a shield. Her hair was pulled back, damp at the edges from the storm. She took in the scene in one slow sweep. Ranger braced in the corridor, the gurney stalled inches from the OR doors, the cluster of staff frozen between protocol and panic. Her gaze settled on the dog first, then the patient, then Emma. "Which one of you is in charge right now?" the woman asked. No one answered immediately. Dana Ruiz stepped forward after a beat. "That would be me, ma'am." "Charge nurse." The woman nodded once. "Special Agent Claire Donnelly. I'm here to ensure custody and continuity of care for that patient." Kettering's spine straightened. "This is a hospital, not a federal holding facility." Donnelly turned to him calmly. "And that man is not a civilian trauma case. Which means we're both operating outside our comfort zones, Doctor." Her eyes flicked back to Ranger. "He hasn't moved." "No," Dana said. "And he won't." Donnelly crouched slowly, keeping her distance. Ranger's ears twitched, but he didn't growl. He watched her with alert neutrality, the way he watched people who hadn't earned trust or suspicion. "That's a good sign," Donnelly murmured. She rose and turned to Barrett. "Handler, yes, ma'am. I'm assuming he's responding to a breach." Barrett nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Donnelly exhaled through her nose. "Then the breach is internal." The word landed hard. Pike bristled. "That's a serious accusation." "So is attempted murder," Donnelly replied evenly. "And I don't make either lightly." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Attempted murder. The phrase reframed everything, the tension, the urgency, the dog's refusal to yield. This wasn't just about arrogance or misunderstanding. This was about survival. Donnelly turned to Emma again. "You're the nurse who intervened." Emma nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Why Emma chose her words carefully. Because the patient's vitals stabilize when the K9 is calm, and the K9 is not reacting randomly. Donnelly studied her face for a long second. "You have prior experience with military working dogs." It wasn't a question. Emma hesitated just enough. "I've been around them," she said. Donnelly didn't push. "Not yet." Dr. Donnelly said, turning back to Kettering. "Has anyone accessed this patient's chart since arrival?" "Of course," Kettering snapped. "That's how medicine works." "I didn't ask how medicine works. I asked who." Kettering opened his mouth, then closed it. He glanced toward the workstation. Pike spoke up. "Standard protocol. ER intake, pharmacy verification, or PrEP." Donnelly nodded. "Then I'll need access logs." Pike's jaw tightened. We're in the middle of an active federal investigation," Donnelly interrupted. Her tone never rose, but the authority beneath it was unmistakable. "You can cooperate now, or later." Pike stared at her for a long moment. Then he gestured sharply to a junior guard. "Get her what she wants." As the guard moved off, Emma noticed Ranger's attention shift not toward Donnelly, not toward Kettering, but toward Pike. The dog's nostrils flared. His tail stiffened. Emma's pulse jumped. Donnelly noticed it too. "Interesting," she murmured. The monitors beeped faster again. The patient's breathing hitched. Dana cursed under her breath. "We need to do something now." Donnelly turned to Barrett. "If we clear the immediate threat, will Ranger stand down?" Barrett hesitated. "If the protocol is followed." "Yes." Kettering scoffed. "And what exactly does that entail?" "A secret handshake." Barrett's eyes flashed. "Respect." Emma inhaled slowly. This was the moment. She felt it settle into her bones like gravity. The past she'd buried, the instincts she'd dulled on purpose, they were all rising, now demanding space. "Agent Donnelly," Emma said quietly. Donnelly turned. "Yes, there is a verbal clearance," Emma said. A call sign. The corridor went still. Barrett's head snapped toward her. "How do you?" Emma held his gaze. "I don't know it for everyone," she said carefully. "But I might know it for him." She nodded toward the patient. Donnelly's expression didn't change, but something sharpened behind her eyes. "You're certain?" Emma wasn't. Not completely. but she nodded anyway. Yes. Pike let out a short laugh. This is insane, Ranger growled. The sound was unmistakable now, directed. Pike took an involuntary step back. Donnelly didn't miss it. Chief Pike, she said calmly, where were you between 2,000, 100 and 2,000, 130 tonight? Pike blinked. What? Answer the question. I was on rounds. With whom? With Pike hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. With my team. Donnelly nodded slowly. We'll verify that. She turned back to Emma. If you're wrong, Nurse Caldwell, you could escalate this. Emma swallowed. If I'm right, I could save his life. Donnelly studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. You have one chance. Say it quietly. Just to the dog. Kettering opened his mouth to protest, but Dana shot him a look that silenced him. Emma stepped forward. She could feel every eye on her back. The weight of rank, reputation, and expectation pressed down hard, but beneath it was something steadier. Muscle memory. Calm. She knelt slowly, keeping her movements deliberate. Ranger's gaze locked onto hers. Up close, she could see the fine scars along his muzzle. The intelligence in his eyes wasn't sentimental. It was honed. Hey, she whispered, not the word she meant, just a bridge. Ranger didn't move. Emma leaned closer, lowering her voice further. It's okay, she murmured. You did your job. The dog's ears flicked. Her heart hammered as she spoke the call sign, not loud enough for anyone else to hear. Just a breath. A fragment of a past she'd sworn never to revisit. Ranger froze. Then slowly, almost reverently, he stepped aside. The corridor exhaled. Dana moved instantly. Or now. As the gurney rolled forward, the patient's breathing steadied. His eyes fluttered open again, clearer this time. They locked onto Emma. His fingers twitched, then curled weakly around the edge of the sheet, as if grounding himself in the present. Donnelly straightened, her expression unreadable. Kettering stared at Emma like he was seeing her for the first time. And behind them all, Ron Pike stood very still, watching Ranger with something dangerously close to fear. Because whatever that dog had recognized, it wasn't over. The operating room doors slammed shut, with a hiss of compressed air sealing off the corridor and leaving behind a vacuum of sound that felt almost unnatural after the chaos. For a moment, no one spoke. Rain still hammered the windows. The helicopter's rotors faded into the distance. And in the middle of it all, Ranger sat down squarely on the tile floor, posture alert but calm, as if a switch had been flipped inside him. Emma remained kneeling, her breath shallow, her pulse still racing in her ears. She hadn't realized how hard she'd been shaking until Dana's hand settled gently on her shoulder. You okay? Dana asked quietly. Emma nodded. Yes, I think so. Across the corridor, Dr. Kettering stared at her as if she'd just rewritten the laws of physics. His gloves were still on. His mouth was slightly open. How he began, then stopped himself. How did you know? Emma pushed herself to her feet slowly. I didn't, she said honestly. Not for sure. That's not an answer, Kettering snapped. No, Dana said, stepping between them, but it's the truth. Agent Donnelly watched the exchange without intervening, her attention divided between Emma and Ron Pike, who stood a few steps back, arms crossed, face set in something too carefully neutral. Dr. Donnelly said at last you have your surgery. I suggest you focus on that. Kettering hesitated, pride warring with pragmatism. Finally, he turned sharply and stalked toward the OR control panel. Prep for exploratory laparotomy. I want blood on standby and vascular ready. As he disappeared through the scrub area, the tension in the corridor shifted, not gone, but transformed. The crisis had moved inward behind sterile doors and bright lights. What remained outside was something slower and darker. Donnelly turned fully toward Pike. Chief, she said, walk with me. Pike's jaw tightened. I have responsibilities here. So do I, Donnelly replied. And right now they include you. They moved a few steps down the hall, far enough that their voices dropped below the hum of the lights. Emma didn't mean to listen, but she didn't have to strain. You accessed the security console tonight, Donnelly said. I do that every night. At 2117, Donnelly continued, you manually overrode a corridor lock near OR storage. Pike scoffed. That's maintenance. Donnelly's gaze didn't waver. Maintenance logs don't show a request. Pike opened his mouth, then closed it. For a fraction of a second, the polished confidence slipped. Ranger's head lifted. Emma felt it again, the tightening in her chest, the sense that the dog was reading a story written beneath words. Dana noticed too. She followed Emma's gaze, her expression sharpening. Agent Donnelly Dana said carefully, "We also had a blood unit discrepancy earlier. Label didn't match the patient." Donnelly turned. When about 20 minutes before the ambulance arrived, Dana said, "We caught it in time." "That's not coincidence," Donnelly murmured. Pike laughed again, louder this time. "This is turning into a witch hunt." "No," Donnelly said. "This is pattern recognition." She glanced at Emma. "You said the dog reacts selectively." "Yes," Emma replied. "Not to chaos, to specific people." "Like Chief Pike," Dana added. Ranger growled, low-controlled. Pike's eyes flicked to the dog. "Call him off." Barrett tightened his grip on the leash, but didn't move Ranger. "He's not doing anything wrong." Emma felt the weight of the moment pressing in on her from all sides. She could step back now. Let the professionals handle it. Let the investigation unfold without her. But something inside her refused to retreat. "Agent Donnelly," she said softly. Donnelly turned. "There's more," Emma said. "Before surgery, I checked the intake bag. I found this." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded blood-specked patch she'd taken from the patient's gear. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. Donnelly's eyes narrowed as she recognized the shape. "Where did you get that? It was hidden under gauze," Emma said. "Not catalogued. That insignia isn't standard," Donnelly said quietly. "It's unofficial, which means it's not supposed to exist." Pike's face drained of color. Dana looked between them. "What does it mean?" "It means Donnelly said that someone wanted this man unidentified, untraceable, and dead." The words settled like ash. Emma's stomach churned not with fear, but with anger, cold and focused. "He trusted this place," Emma said. "He came here to be saved, and someone here tried to make sure he wasn't done or finished." Pike stepped forward suddenly. "You don't have proof." Donnelly didn't raise her voice. "Not yet." Ranger stood. The sound of his paws against the tile echoed far too loudly. Pike froze. "Chief Pike," Donnelly said, her tone calm but final. "I'm asking you to remove your badge and sidearm." "This is outrageous," Pike snapped. "You can't." Ranger took one step forward. "Not aggressive, not threatening, unavoidable." Pike's breath hitched. He looked around, searching for support, but found none. Even Kettering, watching from the scrub room window, had gone still. Slowly, Pike unclipped his badge, then his weapon. They hit the floor with a hollow clatter. Donnelly nodded to a pair of officers who'd appeared at the end of the hall. "Escort him." As they led Pike away, Emma felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that the immediate threat was gone. Dread because she knew deep down that this wasn't finished. Inside, the OR alarm spiked suddenly. Dana's radio crackled. "OR to charge nurse. We've got complications." Blood pressure dropping fast. Emma's heart lurched. Donnelly turned sharply. "What's happening?" Dana was already moving. "They're in his abdomen. Something's wrong." Emma followed without thinking. She scrubbed in alongside Kettering, the smell of antiseptic flooding her senses as the OR lights burned overhead. On the table, the patient lay open, pale and motionless. Blood pooled despite the clamps. Kettering's hands moved fast, but his jaw was clenched, his movements just a shade too sharp. "Fragment migrated," he muttered. Near the artery. Emma stepped closer, her voice steady. "If you rotate the field slightly left, you'll see it." Kettering hesitated. Then he did as she said. The fragment glinted under the light. Kettering exhaled sharply. "Damn." Outside the OR, Donnelly's phone buzzed. She checked it once, then twice. Her expression hardened. She looked up at Ranger, who sat perfectly still by the door. "They're not done," she murmured. "And now they know we're onto them." Inside the OR, Emma locked eyes with Kettering. "We don't have much time," she said. And somewhere deep in the hospital, another door clicked open quietly. The hospital went into lockdown with a sound that was more felt than heard, a low mechanical hum, as magnetic locks engaged, access points sealed, and the building quietly reshaped itself into a controlled maze. Red indicators blinked to life above doors. The air changed. Conversations dropped to whispers. Agent Claire Donnelly stood outside the operating room phone, pressed to her ear eyes, never leaving the corridor. "Confirm again," she said quietly. A pause. Then understood. She ended the call and slipped the phone into her pocket. Her gaze flicked to Ranger, who sat like a statue beside the OR doors. The dog's breathing was slow, measured, focused. "They're testing us," Donnelly murmured. Dana Ruiz stepped up beside her, stripping off bloodied gloves. Whoever put a hand inside this hospital before we caught it," Donnelly said. "My team just flagged an attempted access at the helipad service stairwell. Someone tried to override the lock remotely." Dana's jaw tightened. "During surgery, during vulnerability," Donnelly corrected. Classic. Inside the OR, the atmosphere was razor-edged. Bright lights bleached the color from everything they touched. The smell of cauterized tissue hung in the air. Dr. Miles Kettering worked with brutal efficiency now, his earlier bluster stripped away by the reality bleeding out in front of him. His hands were steady but not calm. "Pressure's dropping again," the anesthesiologist called. Emma Caldwell stood opposite Kettering, suction in hand, eyes locked on the surgical field. Her posture was relaxed in a way that didn't match the stakes, a stillness that came from familiarity rather than ignorance. "Clamp proximal," she said. "Then rotate, don't pull." Kettering did it without arguing. The fragment shifted just enough to reveal the tear beneath. "There," Emma said softly. "That's your bleed." Kettering swore under his breath. "How did you?" later Emma replied. "Focus." Outside, Donnelly motioned 2 uniformed officers closer. "I want eyes on every corridor feeding into this wing. No exceptions." One of them hesitated. "Even staff. Especially staff," Donnelly said. "Credentials don't equal loyalty." Ranger's head lifted sharply. Donnelly followed his gaze down the hall toward the supply corridor. The dog didn't growl. He didn't move, but his body tensed. Dana noticed. "What is it, boy?" Ranger's ears pinned back just slightly. "A warning, not an alarm." Donnelly's radio crackled. "Agent, we've got movement near Central Supply." Badge scanned valid, but camera feed just looped. Donnelly's expression hardened. "Hold position. Do not engage." She turned to Dana. Someone's still inside. Dana's breath left her slowly. Pike didn't act alone. "No," Donnelly said. "People like him never do." Inside the OR, blood loss finally began to slow. The monitor's frantic beeping settled into a steadier rhythm. BP stabilizing anesthesia called. Kettering exhaled, shoulders dropping an inch. He glanced up at Emma, really looked at her this time. "You should have been in trauma surgery." Emma didn't look away from the field. "I was where I needed to be." Kettering hesitated, then nodded once. "Fair." As they closed, the patient's fingers twitched again. A reflex. Life asserting itself. Outside, Donnelly paced once, then stopped. Her radio crackled again. "Agent suspect aborted the supply corridor attempt." "We lost him," Donnelly cursed softly. Description male. Scrubs. Mask. Moved like he knew the building. Donnelly closed her eyes briefly. Then she opened them and made a decision. "Pull the access logs," she said. "Every badge swipe in the last 2 hours. Cross-reference with staff schedules. Anyone out of place, I want names." She turned to Dana. "I need your help." "You have it," Dana said without hesitation. Emma emerged from the OR minutes later, peeling off her gloves. Sweat dampened her hairline. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were heavy. "He's alive," she said quietly. "For now." Donnelly nodded. "Good work." Emma hesitated. "They're not done, are they?" "No," Donnelly said. "They're improvising." Ranger stood as Emma approached. He didn't block her path. He leaned forward just enough that his shoulder brushed her knee, contact brief, intentional. Emma froze. Barrett inhaled sharply. "He doesn't do that." Emma looked down at the dog, heart thudding. Ranger's eyes met hers. Not assessing, acknowledging. "He recognizes you," Donnelly said softly. Emma swallowed. "He remembers the call sign. And more than that," Donnelly added, "he remembers trust." Down the hall, a door clicked open. Too quiet. Ranger's head snapped up. His body shifted between Emma and the sound. Donnelly's hand went to her sidearm. "Lights," Dana whispered. The corridor lights flickered once. Then again. Inside the ICU bay beyond the OR, a monitor alarm spiked. Donnelly's radio exploded with overlapping voices. "Agent power fluctuation backup generators." Ranger lunged, not forward but sideways, slamming his weight against a supply cart as something metallic skittered across the floor where Emma had been standing a heartbeat earlier. A syringe. It rolled to a stop, its clear barrel glinting under the emergency lights. Dana stared at it. That wasn't for the patient. Donnelly knelt, careful not to touch it. "No," she said grimly. "That was for you." Emma's blood went cold. Ranger growled, now deep furious. Donnelly rose, eyes blazing. "Lock this wing down." Now, as alarms blared and boots thundered toward them, Emma realized the truth she'd been circling since the moment the gurney arrived. The dog hadn't just been protecting the seal, he'd been protecting her. The corridor erupted into motion. "Clear the wing," Donnelly shouted as officers flooded in from both ends, boots pounding against tile radios, barking clipped commands. Yellow emergency lights snapped on, bathing the hall in a sickly glow that made every shadow feel alive. Ranger stood over the fallen syringe, teeth bared now, not in panic but in warning. His body was angled outward, a living shield between Emma and the rest of the world. Emma's breath came shallow. She hadn't even seen the syringe fly. 1 second she'd been standing there, the next Ranger had moved with impossible speed, redirecting fate with 60 pounds of muscle and instinct. "That was a tranquilizer," Dana said, voice tight as she stared at the syringe. "Fast acting. High dose." "For a human," Donnelly confirmed grimly. "Not a patient dose." Emma felt the truth settle like a weight in her chest. They weren't trying to delay surgery. "No," Donnelly said. "They were trying to remove you. Across the hall, doctor." Kettering emerged from the OR mask hanging loose around his neck. "What the hell is going on?" Before anyone could answer, Ranger lunged forward again, this time stopping dead in the middle of the corridor, legs braced chest out, blocking access to the ICU doors beyond. "What now?" Kettering snapped. Ranger growled. Low, sustained, final. Barrett stiffened. "Something's wrong." The ICU doors slid open. A man in scrubs stepped halfway out, hands raised. "Easy, easy, I'm just Ranger," exploded into motion. He didn't bite. He didn't tackle. He forced. His shoulder slammed into the man's thigh, knocking him off balance and pinning him against the wall with practiced precision. The man cried out in surprise as his badge skittered across the floor. "Get down," Donnelly shouted, drawing her weapon. The man froze, hands splayed against the tile. Dana moved fast, scooping up the badge. Her eyes flicked over it once, then again. "This isn't ICU staff," she said. "This badge expired last month." Donnelly cuffed the man without ceremony. "Name?" The man swallowed. "Evan Ross." "Wrong answer," Donnelly said. "Try again." Silence. Ranger's growl deepened, vibrating through the corridor like distant thunder. Ross broke. "I don't know the patient's name," he blurted. "I was told to stop the nurse." Emma felt something inside her fracture, not fear, but clarity. "Stop me," how Ross shook his head, breathing hard. "Sedate. Remove. Delay. I didn't know about the dog." Donnelly hauled him to his feet. "Who hired you?" Ross laughed weakly. "You think I ever met them?" Donnelly glanced at Emma. "He's a runner, not the brain." As Ross was dragged away, Kettering stared after him, pale. "Someone tried to kill my patient." And my nurse, Dana, added quietly. Kettering closed his eyes, exhaling. "I was wrong." No one responded. Not yet. Inside, the ICU alarms shrieked again. Dana was already moving. That's his monitor. Emma followed without thinking, Ranger at her side. The dog moved differently now, no longer blocking but guiding, head low, body taut. The patient lay pale against the white sheet's chest, rising unevenly. Tubes snaked from his body machines, whispering life into him. "Pressure's dropping," the ICU nurse said. Sudden onset. Emma's gaze flicked to the IV lines. "Stop," she said sharply. The nurse froze. Emma stepped closer, scanning the setup with surgical precision. "That line, switch it off." "Now." The nurse hesitated. But now Dana barked. The line was cut. Within seconds, the patient's heart rate steadied. Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That wasn't saline," she said. "That was something else." Donnelly cursed softly. They poisoned the line. Kettering stared at Emma, stunned. How did you see that Emma didn't answer immediately? She watched the patient's face, the subtle shift as his breathing eased. "Because I've seen it before," she said finally. The room went quiet. Ranger sat at the foot of the bed, eyes never leaving the door. Donnelly crossed her arms slowly. "It's time you told us who you really are." Emma's shoulders tightened. For years, she'd built a life on not answering that question. On being invisible, on doing her job and going home and letting the past stay buried where it couldn't hurt anyone. But the past had found her anyway. "I'm a nurse," Emma said first. "That part's real." And before that, Donnelly pressed. Emma swallowed. Her voice dropped. "Before that, I was embedded civilian medical support. Disaster response. Military adjacent." Kettering blinked. "That's not common." "No," Emma said. "It's not." Dana studied her. "Is that how you know the call sign?" Emma nodded slowly. "I heard it once. Years ago. In a place where names didn't matter, but trust did." Donnelly's eyes sharpened. "And him," she gestured toward the patient. "I didn't know it was him," Emma said. "Not until I saw the tattoo. And Ranger." The patient stirred. Emma froze. His eyes fluttered open, clearer now than they'd been all night. They locked onto Ranger first, then shifted slowly to Emma. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Took you long enough," he whispered, voice barely audible. Emma's throat closed. "You're supposed to be resting," he huffed weakly. "You always say that." Donnelly stiffened. "You know each other." The man's gaze never left Emma. "Yeah," he murmured. "Saved my life once." Kettering felt the floor tilt beneath him. Emma blinked hard. "That's not," he squeezed her hand weakly. "It is." Ranger leaned forward, placing his head gently against the mattress tail, thumping once. Just once. Donnelly exhaled slowly. "What's your name?" The man closed his eyes again. "You don't need it." Emma leaned closer, her voice soft. "They're trying to kill you." A pause. Then barely audible, "I know." Outside, the ICU boots thundered again, this time heavier, more coordinated. Dana glanced toward the doors. "That sounds like military." Donnelly checked her watch. Right on time. The ICU doors slid open. Two men in plain clothes stepped inside, posture unmistakable even without uniforms. Authority radiated from them, not loud, not demanding, but absolute. Behind them, Ranger stood straighter. Emma's pulse spiked. One of the men met her gaze, recognition flickering. "Emma Caldwell," he said calmly. "We need to talk." And in that moment, she knew her quiet life was over. The room seemed to shrink around them. The two men didn't raise their voices. They didn't have to. Their presence carried a gravity that bent the air, the kind that came from authority earned far from conference rooms or polished corridors. The taller one spoke first. "Agent Donnelly," Sir Donnelly replied, straightening immediately. He nodded once, then turned his attention to the bed, to the man lying pale beneath the web of tubes and monitors. "Status critical but stable," Dana answered. "He nearly didn't make it." The man's jaw tightened. He wasn't supposed to. Emma felt Ranger tense beside her. The dog's ears flicked toward the door, then back to the patient. Alert, calculating. The second man, shorter, broader, eyes sharp as cut glass, looked at Emma, really looked at her. Not her scrubs, not her badge. Her. "You said your name is Emma Caldwell," he said. "Yes, that's the name you're using," he replied calmly. Emma's chest tightened. "It's my name. It's not the one we have on file," he said. Kettering shifted uncomfortably. "This is highly inappropriate. She's a nurse at my hospital. And she's the reason your patient is still alive," Donnelly cut in. The shorter man nodded once. "That's why we're here." The patient stirred again, eyes opening slowly. He drew in a shallow breath. "Easy, Emma," whispered, leaning closer. "You're safe." He let out a weak, breathless laugh. "You always say that too." The taller man stepped closer to the bed, Chief Petty Officer Mercer. The name landed like a dropped instrument. Kettering's head snapped up. Chief Mercer's eyes flickered open fully now. He looked at the man standing over him and smirked faintly. "You're late." "You weren't answering," the man replied. Mercer's gaze shifted back to Emma. "Because I knew she'd be here." Every eye turned to her. Donnelly folded her arms slowly. "You planned this." Mercer's breathing hitched, but his voice stayed steady. "I planned for contingencies." "You planned to get shot and nearly bleed out," Kettering demanded. Mercer's smile faded. "I planned for betrayal." Silence pressed down hard. The shorter man spoke again, his tone colder now. "Your hospital has been compromised. We believe the attempt on his life was meant to ensure he never testified." Dana frowned. Testified to what? The man didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Emma. "You were never supposed to be here." Emma swallowed. Neither was he. Mercer's fingers twitched weakly against the sheet. "She was always supposed to be wherever people get hurt." Emma closed her eyes briefly. Memories surged, dust choked air, shouted coordinates, blood on her hands that never seemed to wash away. Kettering stared at her. "What did you do before nursing school?" Emma opened her eyes. "I kept people alive when doctors couldn't get to them." The room absorbed that. Donnelly's voice was measured. "You weren't military." "No," Emma said. "I wasn't enlisted. I was attached, embedded, civilian status but trained alongside." The shorter man nodded. "She was better than most of our medics." Kettering exhaled slowly. "Jesus." Mercer shifted again, pain flickering across his face. Emma was instantly at his side, adjusting the bed, checking the lines with practiced ease. "You shouldn't be talking," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "You always say that." Ranger rose, placing himself between the bed and the doorway again. A low hum filled the room. The lights flickered. Once, twice. Dana's head snapped up. "No." Donnelly's hand went to her radio. "What's happening?" a voice crackled back. "Agent, we've lost power to the East Wing. Backup generators are online, but..." The lights went out. For half a second, the room plunged into darkness. Then the emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in harsh red. Ranger snarled. A shape moved near the door. Too fast. Too quiet. "Down," Donnelly shouted. A gunshot cracked through the ICU. Plaster exploded from the wall above the bed. Kettering dove behind a cart, swearing. Dana dragged a nurse to the floor. The taller man drew his weapon, firing once toward the doorway. The shape vanished. Ranger lunged. He didn't hesitate. He didn't bark. He tore after the intruder claws, scraping against tile body, a blur of motion. Ranger Emma shouted, heart hammering. She was already moving, following without thinking. Donnelly cursed and followed, weapon raised. They burst into the corridor just in time to see a figure sprinting toward the stairwell scrubs, flapping mask half torn away. Ranger closed the distance in seconds. The intruder spun, raising a syringe. Ranger hit him low, slamming into his legs and sending both of them crashing to the floor. The syringe skittered away, shattering against the wall. The man screamed as Ranger pinned him teeth inches from his throat, growling like something ancient and unstoppable. "Don't move," Donnelly ordered, gun trained on him. The man froze, shaking violently. "I was told she wouldn't be there," he sobbed. "I was told the dog would be sedated." Emma's blood ran cold. "Who told you?" Donnelly demanded. The man's eyes flicked to Emma, then away. "It doesn't matter. You're too late." A distant boom echoed through the hospital, deep and thunderous. The building trembled. Dana's voice crackled over the intercom. "All units report. We've got a breach at the helipad," Donnelly swore. "They're escalating." Emma's thoughts raced. "They want him dead before backup arrives." "And they know time's running out," Donnelly said grimly. Ranger didn't move, holding the intruder pinned until officers arrived and dragged the man away. The corridor fell eerily quiet again. Emma turned back toward the ICU, heart pounding. Inside, Mercer's monitor alarm wailed. She sprinted. The patient's vitals were crashing again, this time hard. "Pressure's gone," Dana shouted. "We're losing him." Emma was at the bedside in seconds. "It's air," she said. They hit the line when the lights went out. She clamped, flushed, corrected hands moving with lethal precision. "Stay with me," she whispered to Mercer. "Don't you dare check out now." Mercer's eyes fluttered open. He locked onto hers. "You always say that," he whispered. Because you always listen, she shot back, voice breaking. Slowly, agonizingly, the monitor steadied. A breath was released across the room as one. Donnelly exhaled. We can't keep doing this here. The taller man nodded. Agreed. Emma looked up sharply. What do you mean? We're moving him, the man said. Now. Kettering stared. He'll die if you move him. He'll die if we don't, the man replied. They know where he is. They know who protects him. Emma's gaze flicked to Ranger, who stood at the foot of the bed, chest rising and falling, hard eyes locked on her. And they know who you are, the man added quietly. The weight of that settled over her like a final verdict. Mercer squeezed her hand weakly. Guess your quiet life didn't last long. Emma swallowed. It was never really quiet. Outside, rotors thundered to life again, closer this time. The kind of sound that meant the end game had begun. The helicopter's rotors hammered the air above Street Catherine's like a countdown. Windows rattled. Ceiling panels hummed. In the ICU, every vibration felt like a reminder that time was no longer on their side. We move in 90 seconds, the taller man said, already issuing commands into a secure headset. Route his helipad to armored transport. No lights. No names. Kettering stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. You can't just extract a post-op patient in hemorrhagic recovery. He'll crash. He's crashing here, the man replied. And they know it. Donnelly was already coordinating, her voice clipped and fast. I want this wing sterile. No one in, no one out except medical and my people. Emma stood at the bedside, hands steady as she checked the lines again. Her mind ran ahead of her, fear, cataloging risks, contingencies, escape routes. This was familiar ground movement under pressure medicine without comfort. Ranger stood shoulder to shoulder with her. Emma, Dana said quietly, stepping close. You don't have to go. Emma looked up at her, surprised. Dana's eyes were steady, resolute. Whatever this turns into, it's not your obligation. Emma shook her head slowly. He won't survive the move without someone who knows his baseline. And Ranger won't leave him without me. As if on cue, Ranger leaned into her leg, a firm, grounding weight. The shorter man nodded. She's right. Kettering scrubbed a hand over his face. This is insane. Then stay, Dana said evenly. But don't get in the way. Kettering looked at Emma again, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. Pride gave way to humility. You call the shots on the move, he said quietly. I'll assist. Emma didn't argue. She just nodded. Thank you. The ICU doors burst open as security cleared the path. Two medics rolled in a compact transport stretcher bristling with monitors and shock-absorbing supports. On my count, Emma said. Slow and smooth. They transferred Mercer carefully, every inch a negotiation with gravity and pain. His face tightened, a low sound escaping his throat. I know, Emma murmured, leaning close. Breathe with me. He did. Ranger moved in lockstep beside the stretcher head, low eyes scanning. Every footstep echoed too loudly in the corridor, each corner a potential ambush. Contact left, someone shouted. Donnelly pivoted, weapon up, only to freeze as a hospital aide stumbled into view, hands raised, eyes wide with fear. Clear, Donnelly snapped. Keep moving. The elevators were out. They took the stairs, slow, deliberate, guarded. Halfway up, Emma's monitor chirped. Pressure's dipping, she said calmly. Give me 30 seconds. She adjusted the drip, her hands precise despite the jostling. Mercer's breathing steadied again. You're doing great, she told him. Almost there. He cracked a weak smile. You always say that. At the helipad door, the wind hit them like a wall. Rain lashed sideways, stinging skin. The helicopter squatted there like a waiting beast, rotors blurring the night into chaos. As they moved forward, Ranger stopped short. Emma felt it instantly. What is it? She asked. Ranger's body stiffened. His gaze locked on the far corner of the pad, shadowed wrong. Hold! Donnelly shouted. A figure stepped out from behind a service unit, arm raised. Ranger exploded forward. The shot cracked wide as the dog slammed into the man's legs, sending him sprawling. The weapon skittered across wet concrete. Down, Donnelly roared. Officers swarmed, weapons trained. The man screamed as he was cuffed, rain plastering his hair to his face. I was told he'd already be dead, he shouted, hysterical. I was told the nurse would be gone. Emma's stomach clenched. Who told you? Donnelly demanded. The man laughed, broken and wild. "You think it ends with me?" The helicopter crew waved frantically. "We're green now." They didn't wait. Mercer was loaded in seconds. Emma climbed in with him, bracing as the door slammed shut. Ranger leapt aboard without hesitation, turning to face the open ramp until it closed. As the helicopter lifted, Street Catherines fell away beneath them, lights scattered like embers in the storm. Inside, the noise softened to a relentless thrum. Emma checked Mercer's vitals again. Stable, fragile, but holding. "You made it," she said softly. He opened his eyes, searching for her. "Knew you would." She exhaled the tension she'd been holding, finally cracking. "You scared me." He smiled faintly. "That's new." The taller man leaned forward from the jump seat. "We'll have you secure in 6 minutes." Mercer nodded weakly. Then his gaze drifted to Ranger. "Good boy." Ranger's tail thumped once. Emma rested back against the wall, exhaustion crashing over her in waves now that there was space for it. Her hands trembled for the first time all night. Donnelly's voice came through the headset. "Emma, yes, when we land this gets bigger. Testimony, protection, you'll be visible." Emma closed her eyes briefly. "I know. You still willing?" She looked at Mercer. "At Ranger, at the storm beyond the window?" "Yes," she said. "I am." The helicopter banked hard. Below them the city blurred into streaks of light and shadow. Somewhere far behind, plans unraveled and lies began to surface. And in the narrow space between sky and ground, justice started to move loud, undeniable, and finally impossible to stop. The helicopter touched down in a secured hangar miles from the city, the landing so smooth it barely registered, until the rotors slowed and the noise fell away into a ringing quiet. Floodlights snapped on. Armed figures moved in practiced choreography, doors opening perimeter, sealing eyes everywhere at once. Emma was already moving when the skids kissed concrete. "Easy," she murmured, hand steady as the stretcher rolled out. "We're on solid ground." Mercer's breathing hitched with the change in pressure, then evened out again. Ranger leapt down, first paws skidding slightly on the damp floor, before he planted himself at the stretcher's side, scanning the hangar with a predator's patience. "Medical suite is ready," someone called. They moved fast, but not rushed through a corridor that smelled of metal and antiseptic, into a compact treatment bay built for exactly this kind of night. No windows, redundant power. Equipment bolted down like it expected turbulence. Emma took command without announcing it. She checked the lines, reconfirmed meds, adjusted the angle of Mercer's bed by a few inches, watching the monitors respond like a living thing. "Pressure's holding," she said. "Let's keep him warm." A thermal blanket appeared. Someone handed her fresh gloves. The team moved as one. From the doorway, Dr. Kettering watched hands idle for the first time since the OR. He didn't interrupt. He didn't question. He simply learned. Agent Donnelly entered last reign, streaking her jacket, eyes sharp and alert. She gave a quick nod to the security lead. "We're clean." "For now," he replied. 3 suspects in custody. 2 more names flagged. Donnelly exhaled. "Good." She turned to Emma. "How is he?" Emma glanced up. "He'll make it if we don't get careless." Mercer cracked a faint smile. "She's not wrong." Donnelly allowed herself a thin smile. "You've always been stubborn." Mercer closed his eyes again, exhaustion pulling him under. Ranger settled at the foot of the bed, posture relaxed for the first time that night. His eyes closed halfway. Not asleep, just trusting. Emma leaned against the counter, the adrenaline finally draining from her body. Her legs felt heavy, her hands ached. She realized she hadn't eaten in hours. Dana Ruiz appeared in the doorway, hair, damp eyes rimmed red with fatigue. She crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Emma into a brief, fierce hug. "You scared the hell out of me," Dana said. Emma laughed weakly. "You should see my blood pressure." Dana pulled back, studying her. "You did good. More than good." "Thank you," Emma said quietly. Kettering stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Emma." She turned. He held her gaze, the ego she'd met hours ago replaced by something humbler. "I nearly killed your patient tonight. Not with my hands, but with my assumptions." Emma didn't rush to reassure him. She let the truth stand. "I won't make that mistake again," he continued. "Not with you. Not with anyone." She nodded once. "That's all that matters." Donnelly watched the exchange, filing it away. "Emma," she said, "when the sun comes up, there will be questions. Media, Committees. People who weren't here tonight will want explanations. Emma straightened. I understand. And your name will come up, Donnelly added. Not just as a nurse. Emma looked at Mercer, then at Ranger. I can live with that. Donnelly's phone buzzed. She checked it and frowned. We've identified the contractor behind the hit, private security firm with federal access. They didn't expect resistance at a civilian hospital. Now they have it, Dana said. And they'll have accountability, Donnelly replied. This goes all the way up. Emma felt a strange calm settle over her. The chaos was over. What remained was consequence. A few hours later, dawn crept into the hangar through a narrow skylight, painting the concrete in pale gold. Mercer slept monitors steady. Ranger shifted closer to Emma's chair, resting his head against her knee. She ran her fingers through his fur absently, grounding herself in the simple reality of it. You did good, she whispered. Ranger's tail thumped once. The doors opened again, and this time the room seemed to recognize the presence before anyone spoke. The man who entered wore no uniform, but his bearing carried unmistakable weight, decades of command distilled into posture alone. Rear Admiral Thomas Keene stopped just inside the bay. Every person stood. Keene lifted a hand. At ease. His gaze went to the bed, to Ranger, then to Emma. Recognition flickered. Emma Caldwell, he said. Emma's pulse jumped. Sir, you've grown, Keene said quietly. Last time I saw you, you were arguing with a flight surgeon about triage priorities. Dana blinked. Kettering stared. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Some habits stick. Keene nodded, once approving. They kept my people alive. He turned to Donnelly. Report. As Donnelly spoke, Keene listened without interruption, eyes never leaving Mercer. When she finished, he nodded again. Chief Mercer will recover, Keene said. And when he does, he'll testify. Mercer stirred, eyes opening slightly. Wouldn't miss it. Keene allowed a rare smile. Rest. He turned back to Emma. You didn't have to step into this. Emma met his gaze. I know, but you did. Yes, sir. Keene studied her for a long moment. The service has a way of calling its people back whether they wear the uniform or not. Emma inhaled slowly. I chose nursing because I wanted to help without fighting. Keene nodded. And tonight you fought anyway. He reached into his coat and handed her a sealed envelope. Open it later, he said. Or don't. The choice is yours. Emma took it, the weight of possibility heavier than paper. As Keene turned to leave, Ranger lifted his head and watched him go, calm, unthreatened, satisfied. Emma looked around the room one last time. The quiet machines, the exhausted faces, the man who would live because no one ignored the warning signs. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe. Justice was moving now. Slowly, relentlessly. And whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Morning arrived without ceremony. It seeped into the secure hangar in thin bands of light, pale and unforgiving, illuminating the exhaustion etched into every face. The night's adrenaline had burned away, leaving behind the ache, the kind that settled deep in muscle and bone, reminding everyone what survival actually cost. Emma sat beside Mercer's bed, hands folded in her lap, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. The monitors whispered reassurance now instead of screaming alarms. Ranger lay stretched out at the foot of the bed, chin on his paws, eyes half-lidded but alert. He hadn't moved more than a few feet since landing. Dana Ruiz stood nearby, nursing a paper cup of coffee she hadn't touched. He's stable, she said softly, as if saying it louder might tempt fate. Emma nodded. He's past the worst of it. Because of you, Dana added. Emma didn't answer. She had learned long ago that accepting praise too quickly could feel like tempting the universe. Instead, she reached down and scratched Ranger behind the ears. His tail thumped once slow and content. Across the bay, Agent Donnelly coordinated quietly with a cluster of officials. Phones buzzed. Names were exchanged. Paperwork began to replace weapons. Dr. Kettering hovered at the edge of the room, uncertain now, like a man trying to relearn his place. After a long moment, he stepped forward. Emma, he said. She looked up. I spoke to administration, he continued. I filed a full report. No edits, no softening. Her brow creased. About what? About everything, he said. My orders, my assumptions, my failure to listen. Dana glanced at him sharply. Kettering met her gaze. If there are consequences, I'll accept them. Emma studied his face. She didn't see fear there, only resolve. "That matters," she said, "for what it's worth." He nodded, relief flickering briefly before he stepped back again, giving her space. A stir from the bed drew Emma's attention. Mercer's eyes opened clearer, now focused. "You still hovering?" he rasped. Emma smiled faintly. "Someone has to." He shifted, wincing. "Where are we?" "Safe," she said. "That's the important part." He glanced down at Ranger. Figured he'd stick around. Ranger lifted his head, ears flicking as if acknowledging the compliment. Footsteps approached, measured, deliberate. Rear Admiral Keene returned this time without urgency, shadowing his stride. He stopped at the foot of the bed, hands clasped behind his back. "Chief," he said. Mercer attempted something between a salute and a wave. "Sir." Keene stopped him with a raised hand. "Don't." He turned his attention to Emma. "We'll need a formal statement from you." Emma nodded. "I'll give it." "Not today," Keene said. "Today you rest." Emma blinked. "Sir, that's an order," he said gently. She hesitated, then nodded. Keene addressed the room. "The individuals responsible for last night's attempt are in custody. Evidence has been secured. This will not be buried." The words carried weight, not as a promise, but as a fact. Donnelly stepped forward. "We traced the payments. Private contractors using hospital access as cover. It goes higher than Pike." Keene's expression hardened. "Then we'll go higher." Dana exhaled slowly. "About time." Mercer closed his eyes briefly. "Guess I'll be busy once I can walk." Keene allowed himself a thin smile. "You'll testify. Then you'll heal. In that order." When Keene turned to leave again, he paused beside Emma. "The envelope," he said quietly. "You don't owe anyone an answer." Emma nodded, fingers brushing the sealed edge in her pocket. After he left, the room settled into a quieter rhythm. People filtered out one by one, leaving only those who belonged there by duty or by choice. Dana squeezed Emma's shoulder. "I'll check on my unit. Don't disappear on me." "I won't," Emma promised. When they were alone again, Mercer opened his eyes and studied her. "You know they'll talk." "I know. Dig into your past." "I know. And you still stepped in front of that hallway." Emma met his gaze. "I couldn't not." He smiled, faint but sincere. "That's why Ranger listened to you." She swallowed. "I didn't think he'd remember." Mercer's voice softened. "Some bonds don't fade." Ranger rose, then moving closer to Emma, pressing his shoulder against her leg. It wasn't fear or vigilance. Now it was reassurance. She exhaled, resting her hand on his back. Hours later, as the sun climbed higher, the hangar doors opened again, this time to a small group of officials, with cameras slung low, kept at a respectful distance. Statements would be taken. Stories would spread. The truth would inch into daylight. Emma stood when Donnelly approached. "They'll want you out front eventually," Donnelly said. "But we can delay." Emma shook her head. "No, let's do it." Donnelly studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Your call." Before stepping away, Emma turned back to Mercer. "I'll be right outside." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Take Ranger." She glanced at the dog. Ranger stood immediately, tail lifting ready. Outside the bay, the air felt different, lighter but sharper. Emma answered questions carefully, truthfully, without embellishment. She didn't dramatize. She didn't minimize. She let facts speak. When it was over, Donnelly exhaled. "You handled that well." Emma managed a tired smile. "I've had practice staying calm under pressure." As they turned back toward the bay, a junior officer hurried up, breathless. "Agent New Development." Another name just surfaced. Someone higher. Donnelly's jaw tightened. Of course it did. Emma felt the ripple of it. Justice rarely arrived alone. It came with echoes. Back inside, Mercer slept again. Ranger settled at Emma's feet. She finally sat down, pulling the envelope from her pocket. She didn't open it. Not yet. She watched the steady line on the monitor, the simple miracle of breath continuing, and allowed herself just for a moment to believe that the hardest part was over. Outside, the world was waking up, and it would soon learn what had happened in the quiet hours before dawn. The afternoon light slanted through the high windows of the secure medical bay, softer now, less interrogating than the dawn. The crisis had passed, but its echo lingered in every quiet footstep and lowered voice. This place had learned something in the dark hours, and it wasn't eager to forget. Emma stood by the bed, checking Mercer's vitals one more time. The numbers were steady, stronger than before. Each rise and fall of his chest felt like a small, defiant victory. "He's officially out of immediate danger," the attending physician said, signing off the chart. "ICU transfer tonight, then long-term recovery." Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Mercer cracked his eyes open, catching it. "That sigh means I get to complain later, right?" she smiled. "It means you're alive to complain." Ranger lifted his head at the sound of Mercer's voice and stood padding closer. He rested his chin gently against the mattress tail, swaying once in an unguarded, almost playful arc. Mercer's hand trembled as he reached out, fingers brushing the dog's fur. "Good boy," he murmured. "You did your job." Ranger's ears flicked, accepting the praise without ceremony. Across the bay, Agent Donnelly finished a quiet call and approached Emma. "The arrests are being formalized," she said. "Pike's cooperating. Not out of conscience, out of fear." "Of what?" Emma asked. "Of how much we already know," Donnelly replied, "and how much more is coming." Emma nodded slowly. Justice, she'd learned, rarely arrived as a single, clean moment. It came in waves, relentless, grinding. "Doctor," Kettering approached hesitantly, holding a folded document. "I wanted you to see this," he said, offering it to Emma. "My formal apology. And my recommendation." She unfolded it, scanning quickly. Her eyebrows lifted despite herself. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "Yes, I did," Kettering replied. "Because if I don't acknowledge what nearly cost a man his life, then I haven't learned a thing." Emma met his gaze. For the first time, she saw no defensiveness there, only accountability. She nodded once. "Thank you." He exhaled, relief evident, and stepped away. Dana Ruiz joined her moments later, arms crossed, expression softer than Emma had ever seen it. "Word spreading," Dana said. "Not the classified stuff, but the truth." Emma glanced around. "And the hospital," Dana smiled faintly. "We'll be better for it. Some lessons need scars." A nurse passed by and gave Emma a small nod of respect. Another followed with a quiet, "Thank you." It wasn't applause. It was something deeper, recognition without spectacle. Emma felt her throat tighten. As evening approached, Rear Admiral Keene returned one final time. He stopped at Mercer's bedside, speaking quietly with him before turning to Emma. "It's time," Keene said. Emma nodded. She reached into her pocket and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. An offer, not a recall, not an order, a choice. A role bridging civilian medicine and military crisis response. Quiet, selective, exactly where lives slipped through the cracks. Emma folded the paper carefully. Keene watched her. "You don't have to decide today." Emma looked at Mercer, at Ranger, at the steady machines and the people who had stood when it mattered. "I already have," she said. Keene's eyes softened. "Then, welcome back on your terms." He extended a hand. Emma shook it firmly. When he left, the room felt lighter somehow, as if a chapter had finally closed. That night, as Mercer was transferred to the ICU, Emma walked beside the gurney. Ranger followed without leash or command, staying perfectly in step. At the ICU doors, Mercer's hand tightened weakly around hers. "You didn't have to come with me this far." She smiled. "I know." He searched her face. "You saved my life." Emma shook her head. "We did." Ranger gave a soft huff, as if agreeing. As the doors closed, Emma stepped back into the corridor alone for the first time since the chaos began. The silence there felt different now, not heavy but earned. She leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Dana appeared beside her, offering a bottle of water. "World didn't end," Dana said gently. Emma laughed softly, came close. Dana nudged her shoulder. "Proud of you." Emma took a long drink, then nodded. "Me too." Later, as she walked out into the cool night air, Ranger at her side, Emma glanced up at the sky. The storm had passed. Stars peeked through the thinning clouds, distant but steady. She thought of the hallway, the growl, the whispered call sign, the moment everything could have gone wrong. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room was the one that mattered most. Sometimes courage didn't wear rank or raise its voice. It just stepped forward and refused to move. Courage doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet decision made in a crowded hallway when every instinct says to step back and let authority speak for you. Real courage is choosing responsibility over comfort, truth over silence, and compassion over fear, especially when no one is watching yet. Respect isn't about titles or uniforms. It's about listening when something feels wrong, honoring experience wherever it comes from, and understanding that trust is earned through action. Justice, too, is rarely instant. It moves slowly, carried by people willing to stand their ground and protect what's right, even at personal cost. If this story moved you, share where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. We read every comment. And if you believe that quiet strength and integrity still matter, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.